Welcome to this episode of Global Insider Talks. We're speaking today with international banking leader and member of the Factum Global Advisory Board, Aseem Goyal, joining us from Bangkok, Thailand. Welcome, Aseem.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for staying up late tonight and being with us. Aseem has lived and worked in Asia for the last 25 years. During his time, he worked for ANZ and Standard Chartered in Bangkok, Shanghai, Taipei, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Vietnam. And he currently works as a consultant and advisor in Southeast Asia and helps companies formulate and execute their strategy for Asia, for expanding to Asia. So, Aseem, let's jump right in here. Let's start off by talking about the China Plus One strategy, where Western companies are no longer relying just on China for business in the region. We know that Singapore is often chosen as sort of the premier market, given their strong rule of law, and for other reasons, obviously. But what other markets in Southeast Asia are emerging as growth opportunity spots for Western companies?
Yeah, that's correct, Jeff. So the China Plus One strategy is driven by the need for companies to focus their investments on countries other than China, which they've done for a long time. And while diversification of supply chain and risk management is one reason, we all know that geopolitics also plays a part. So when you think of this plus one, many countries come to mind: India, Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand. But in my view, the two countries that stand to benefit the most from this China Plus One strategy is Vietnam and Thailand.
And so why Vietnam and Thailand, Aseem? I know you're sitting in Bangkok right now. Maybe you're partial to one or the other for different reasons. If you can elaborate a little bit more.
Sure, Jeff, there are many reasons, and let me just list a few. First of all, both Thailand and Vietnam have historically been export-driven economies, and they're quite well embedded and integrated into the global supply chains. So that's number one. Secondly, both the countries have signed quite a lot of free trade agreements with their major trading partner. Of course, the number keeps changing, but at last count, they're about 15 each. Number three, both the countries are also members of this Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which was recently finalized. It brings together the 10 ASEAN nations as well as major economies in Asia, such as China, Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. So they're both part of that. And Vietnam, in addition, is also part of a Pacific group grouping, which brings together 10 Pacific nations like Australia, Canada, Mexico, and Japan. And finally, both the countries are quite focused on their ease of doing business rankings. Now, Thailand is number 21 as we speak, aiming to be 19 in the short term. Similarly, Vietnam, starting from number 90, 10 years ago, is currently number 70 and aiming to be 65 in the short term. So there are plenty of advantages that both these countries provide to foreign investors.
Incredible progress in the last couple of years, in particular, despite COVID, which has really been interesting. And we probably won't have time to talk necessarily about supply chain, but given supply chain issues, maybe with China, these markets have been really the go-to for production, manufacturing, et cetera. So what are some of the differences and advantages of these markets? If you are a Western company and you have a specific product or service and you really only have budget to go into one market, talk about the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, sure. I previously mentioned some of the advantages that both countries have. So let me just talk about some of their individual advantages. So when you look at Vietnam, obviously it benefits from low manufacturing costs, low land costs, the low cost of doing business overall. Plus, it's got very attractive demographics, which hopefully we'll talk about later on in the discussion. So that attracts, a lot of companies. On the other hand, Thailand benefits from well-developed infrastructure, as well as it's been sort of the manufacturing giant for a long time. So it's more embedded into the global supply chains. But having said that, I think it depends on the industry or the priorities of the companies, their expansion strategies. Both of these provide different advantages.
So perfect for my follow-up question. So what are those industries in Thailand that are particularly hot right now? If I'm a Western, executive looking for growth?
Yeah, so Thailand, first of all, is the second largest economy in ASEAN out of the 10 countries. And the size is approximately $550 billion at the moment. Now, the industry that the country has traditionally been good at are tourism, which we all know about, autos, food and agriculture, electronics, finance, and all that. And going forward, these are expected to continue to be the growth sectors. But with technology and innovation, which you and I hear about so often, it provides an opportunity for Thailand to move up the value chain. And if I can just take about a minute to explain what I mean by that. Now, Thailand, the service sector contributes about 58% to the overall GDP of Thailand. Now, if you compare to the global average, which is about 65%, that's quite low. And if you compare to some of the developed economies like the US and UK, I mean, they are at 75 and 80%. So Thailand is relatively low. And the other challenge that Thailand has is that even this 58% is comprised of relatively lower value added services like restaurants and trading and hotels. Only about 14% is made up of what we call the high value services such as software and finance and telecoms and all that. So the opportunity for Thailand is to, first of all, increase the contribution of the service sector, as well as make it more value added and introduce more serviceability into its manufacturing sector. Now, we've all heard of, how robots and drones and artificial intelligence, blockchain, and Internet of Things are introducing innovation into the processes. Now, fortunately for Thailand, all of the industries that is focusing on, these technological innovations are applicable. So it's got an opportunity to move up the value chain and be more competitive in the global supply chain.
You're talking about innovation and you mentioned blockchain. There have been obviously the fintech industry is really expanding across Southeast Asia. It's lowering the level of the unbanked and bringing banking right into mobile phones and making it more accessible to people. So let's pivot for a second and talk about fintech. What is it that's where are the opportunities there for fintech?
Yeah. So the fintech scene is actually really exciting in both Thailand and Vietnam, and especially in the last 2 years, it's really picked up. Vietnam has over 200 fintech companies. Thailand has about 100. But the exciting thing for Thailand is that in 2019, only about 2% of the investment directed at Southeast Asia fintech came to Thailand. It's gone up to 15% now. And most of the investment has gone into payments and blockchain and lending. In Vietnam, it's directed more at payments. So if I was to look at where the opportunities are, I believe they're in lending, they're in wealth management, they're in crypto trading, they're in blockchain. But if I have to pick one out of two, I think it's generally acknowledged that Vietnam is expected to be the new kind of the sort of the hot market for fintech going forward.
Right now, you this is a good segue to you've given me insights into Samsung, the mobile phone manufacturer. Let's tell our viewers a little bit more about your Samsung story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really fascinating story in Vietnam. And it was happening actually while I was based in Vietnam. Now, Samsung entered Vietnam in 2013 with an initial investment of $1.8 billion. You fast forward to 2019, they have invested $18 billion. And in 2019, they built $66 billion out of Vietnam. Now, for context, that's 25% of the GDP of the country. And 50% of the laptops and the phones that Samsung sells globally, they're actually manufactured in Vietnam. Now, more recently, you have Google, you have Microsoft, you have Intel. I mean, they're all announcing major investments for Vietnam, and that's why the country's become a major sort of exporter for phones and computers and laptops.
So, incredible growth in Vietnam. What else are you seeing? What other changes have you seen recently there?
Well, in general, apart from the electronics and the computers, which we talked about, the country is also moving up the value chain in footwear and in textiles. And seafood has historically been a major contributor. I think we we've all heard of the advantages, why multinationals find Vietnam so attractive, and that's primarily due to its demographics. I mean, the population is 100 million, is supposed to go up to 120 million in about 5 years. The median age is 32.5 years. I mean, that's really young, compared to, let's say, 40.5 in Thailand. The women participation in workforce is one of the highest globally. It's 79%. If you look at even the US and China and Thailand, it's below 70%, actually closer to 65%. So the historical challenges that Vietnam has had are around, a lot of the gray areas in their legal and regulatory infrastructure and some of the physical infrastructure not being there. But even that, the government has come a long way in addressing those in the last 2 to 3 years.
This has been a fascinating conversation, Asim. We're coming to the end of our time. So we always like to ask our guests, what's some advice that you have for executives, entrepreneurs, even in the West that are seeking opportunity in Southeast Asia? So what are your 3 sort of pieces of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, the 3 pieces of advice would be, first of all, focus on the market that you're targeting, get local expertise, and focus on relationships. And I can take about a minute to talk a little bit more about this. A lot of the clients I talk to, they talk about an Asian strategy. And I sometimes have to be quite blunt with them, saying, well, there's no Asian strategy, because as you and I know, Asia is a huge region with different infrastructure, different languages, and different levels of development. So you really need to focus on the market that you're targeting. And which brings me to the point about tapping into local expertise, because the legal and regulatory infrastructure is relatively more complex. And when you add the language challenges to that, it can make for a lot of challenge. And which brings me to the last point, that how do you navigate this landscape? By building local relationships. Now, that's not new to anyone. I mean, we call it networking in the West. We call it guanxi in China. So it's everywhere. But in my own experience, having worked in all these markets, that it adds an extra touch in these 2 markets that we're talking about, let's say Vietnam and Thailand, and perhaps other markets as well. So focus on relationships, tap into local expertise, and understand the market that you're going into.
Asim, thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you for your broad support of Factum Global. I'd love to share that with you personally. And for more information on Factum Global and our Global Insider Talks video series, or to sign up for our newsletter, The Global Insider, visit factumglobal.com. Thank you.